Today on the Blockchain Report, Bitcoin is holding on to 90K for dear life, and it might have something to do with Trump hosting the Saudi crown prince at the White House for a $1 trillion dinner deal, proving diplomacy is mostly pistachio-crusted lamb and fighter jet flyovers. Whales are loading up on Bitcoin while smaller holders are sweating through their shirts, and the SEC drops its 2026 plan with zero mention of crypto, basically leaving Bitcoin on red. All that and more right now on today's show. Let's go! Are we gonna scout the charts? All right, guys, welcome to another day here at the Blockchain Report. I am your host, Hank Hudson, and we've got a lot to talk about on today's show. We got more news on the Epstein Files. We got what's going on with the whales in Bitcoin, and we've got price action and charts that we want to get into, and we're going to do that right now with our market rundown this morning, where we're going to take a look at how Bitcoin is doing, and then take a look under the hood at some of the charts and see if we can kind of figure out where things are headed next. So let's run the stinger. It's time for this morning's market rundown. All right, it's Wednesday, and the Bitcoin gods are not really smiling favorably on us this morning. You can see Bitcoin's down about 3%. We are clinging on to that 90K mark for dear life, and it is an important one. And what I'd like to do now is get into our charts this morning and see if we can kind of take a peek at what is actually happening in the numbers. So let's bring them up here, because it's time for us to take a look and see how sentiment is working today. All right, so this morning we are breaking down three of the most important metrics on chain, okay? So net realized profit loss, ETF flows, and the MVRV Z-score. Now, these are the charts that tell you what real money is doing, not memes, not vibes, but actual capital moving on chain. So let's take a peek. So this first chart that we have here, this is the net realized profit loss chart, okay? This one shows us the profit and loss that investors are realizing on chain every day. So the big green bars we're seeing here, that's people selling at a profit. Simple enough. Red bars, people selling at a loss. And the big loss events tend to happen at panic bottoms or major capitulation moments. So yesterday, we saw $1.33 billion in net realized losses. Today, that number jumped to $1.7 billion. That's the highest loss event since August of 2023. Now, here's the key insight, okay? The last three times we hit this level of realized losses, Bitcoin was forming a local bottom before the next leg up. But, and this part is important, these loss spikes also happen at the start of bear markets. So this is one of those fork in the road moments, okay? We are either bottoming here, or this is the opening chapter of the bear, okay? And yes, unfortunately, there is no way to know in real time. So we're gonna do our best to try to explain it to you here, okay? So first thing I wanna look at are these red loss clusters. We can see here, here, and here, okay? So what you can see right here is that you're visually, what we're showing is huge realized losses, okay? So historically near bottoms, but the declining green bars that we're seeing right here, here, and here, all right, that's less profit taking, which shows weakness in the trend. So this is one of those charts where the signal is incredibly loud. The question is, which direction is it pointing this time, all right? So let's bring up chart number 2. This is the ETF flows, all right? So this chart shows big institutional sentiment. When the bars are green, money is flowing into Bitcoin ETFs. When it's red, money is fleeing the building like the fire alarm just went off. Right now, we've had $2.26 billion in outflows over the last 5 straight days. And over the last 14 business days, $4.1 billion in net outflows. $4.1 billion. That's a lot, all right? So that is not a bullish signal, okay? That is institutions literally hitting the nope button on Bitcoin right now. So this is the clearest sign of bearish sentiment that we've had in nearly months, okay? And what you can see here in these 5 bars, these are our last 5 days here. It's been a bloodbath, okay? So this is why the price keeps losing key levels. You can't go up when $4 billion worth of spot Bitcoin is being vacuumed out the door. Now, the ETF flows matter because they are the deepest pool of demand Bitcoin has ever had. Now, when that pool drains, price generally tends to follow. All right, so let's go to our last chart of the day here. This is the MVRV Z-score. This tells us whether Bitcoin is overvalued or undervalued relative to the average cost basis of the entire network. Let's bring up that new chart here, guys. So when it breaks down below the median band that we're going to see here in a second, that tends to signal some macro weakness. And right now, we are in fact breaking below a key level that has been support for every local bottom in this cycle, okay? And that is not great. This chart is definitely leaning bearish right now because we've now dipped beneath the level that held all three prior bottoms since 2023, okay? So let's take a look right here. Let's see some previous touch points. You can see here, here, and here. Okay, that's the where the price bounced in 2023 through 2024. Now, what this visual that's actually showing us is the previous dips and then the bounces after. Now, the current dip, you can see right here, looks like it could be even breaking lower. So this is the type of breakdown you get when a bull cycle is weakening or maybe ending. So the bulls really need this level to reverse and quickly. So now the question is, hey, you told us about each of these individual charts, but what the heck does this all mean in the totality of things, right? So here's the big picture. Some neutral metrics are now actually leaning bearish. The market is showing real signs of capitulation, heavy losses, ETF outflows, weakening MVRV trend. But capitulation can also be what creates bottoms. So this is one of those periods where investors have to look at their own time horizon and risk tolerance and make a probabilistic bet. So Bitcoin is either carving out a bottom in the low 90s or opening the door to a deeper move down. So we'll be watching realized losses, ETF flows, and the network cost basis closely to see which way this will end up breaking. And of course, we're going to keep you abreast of this as we get more info. All right, we got a lot to talk about today, so it's time for this morning's bull run. Let's run the stinger and get to it. All right, welcome back. It's time for this morning's bull run. We've got a lot to talk about today, and in just a minute, we're going to be joined by one of my favorite people in the entire Bitcoin universe. Of course, we're talking about Nolan Bowerly, who'll be joining us in just a second to chat about these stories. But let's get into the first one, and then we'll bring him in after to chat. So the Senate is expected to take the House-passed Epstein Files this morning, give it a quick stamp, and ship it straight to President Trump, who has already said that he's going to sign it. The release could include federal records related to Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and any other individuals, including government officials who appear in connection with Epstein's criminal activities, civil settlements, immunity deals, plea agreements, or investigative proceedings. Now, victims' identities would be excluded from this, however. So far, though, the Justice Department hasn't responded to questions about whether it will comply or how. Now, this is especially awkward because Bondi only announced a renewed review of the Epstein Files last Friday, only hours after Trump publicly ordered her to do so. And the DOJ might try to use that new review as an excuse to withhold documents. That would contradict the DOJ and FBI statement back in July when they said they found no evidence to justify an investigation into any uncharged individuals. But sources are saying it's still unlikely the DOJ releases everything. Anything tied to ongoing investigations or potential executive privilege claims will probably stay locked up tight. And yesterday, Trump said he doesn't really care when the Senate passes it and that Republicans should stay focused on what he calls his list of victories, ranging from border policy to inflation to tax cuts and military spending. A White House official said the bill will be signed whenever it gets to the White House. Trump could have ordered the release himself without Congress acting, but now the political pressure has a paper trail. All right, we're bringing in Nolan Bowerly to chat about this. Nolan, good morning. Happy Wednesday. How are you? Epstein Files, man.
I've been using the kayfabe frame forever, right? Kayfabe. And the wrestling idea of how you get people to be drawn into a story, that's what the wrestlers noticed in the early days of wrestling. It was how is it that the audience willingly participates in the heel and babyface archetypes, and how it draws people in. And go back to when I originally predicted that this would all be kayfabe, that Epstein was all about getting people to want and beg for the information. Because the truth is, we were able to follow the money just a few years ago in 2022. If you remember, you had Joe Biden impromptu leave America over the Christmas holidays. He flew down to the U.S. Virgin Islands because the Attorney General of the U.S. Virgin Islands was proceeding against J.P. Morgan and related to the Epstein files, more or less following the money. Now, today we see Rep. James Comer pursuing that same line of inquiry, following the money back to the Virgin Islands, of course, because we've seen this Plaskett. I guess she's the congresswoman from the Virgin Islands. She was texting with Epstein live in the chamber. And so it's created this situation where everyone is demanding this. That was what happened when Elon and Trump first got in the fight. That was the kayfabe. And remember what it spurred. It spurred two conversations immediately. It was all about the big, beautiful bill and the budget and how much was appropriate to borrow, spend, and how much debt you can put onto the balance sheet. And of course, that's the famous
Mhm.
Trump is in the Epstein files. Now, as the Epstein vote just happened, who shows up at the White House last night but Elon Musk? He makes his return. Now, if I was Vince McMahon, all right, and remember when Hulk Hogan
Mhm.
or any of these guys would go make a movie, they would write him out of the storyline
Mhm.
for a little while. Hey,
Right.
I'm not sure if it's true.
Elon's got to insert himself.
It follows my and that was my prediction. My prediction when Elon and him first
Mhm.
got in the fight was this would resolve when the Epstein files are finally released. And was it a coincidence? The vote happened on the same day that he returned. I don't know, but it's what I predicted. So here we are.
You did. I mean, you clearly know your theater, whether it be in the WWE or politically. Like, and it's a lot of it this year, and specifically now with these Epstein files, we're all salivating, wondering what's going on in those. Although I feel like we're going to get just a small picture of what's actually in those, because there's no way Trump does a 180 like that unless he's got some guarantees that things are going to be okay for him. But we'll see. But it does beg a lot of questions, right? So, Nolan, from a government systems perspective, when Congress unanimously forces the release of files like this, what does that tell you about the power struggle between political pressure, public pressure, and like institutional inertia right now?
Well, I think I've often described Bitcoin as, in the white paper, it says a P2P electronic cash network. I've been saying for a long time, it's better to think of it as a P2P information network because Bitcoiners in this P2P way, like on this show, like in Bitcoin meetup culture, like in Bitcoin events, Bitcoiners don't really get their information from legacy media. I saw Saifedean had put a poll out yesterday, and it was amongst Bitcoiners, and it proved his theory. He said, amongst Bitcoiners, which of you who hold majority, to qualify for the poll, I guess, it was just a Twitter poll, so it's not scientific, but it proves his point.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a Bitcoiner, do you use the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Economist, the Guardian? Do you use these news sources? And the results were incredible. I think 3% of Bitcoiners who answered the poll said they even bother looking at these news sources. And 20 something didn't answer. They just said, just show me the results. But 70 something percent unequivocally said they do not consume any legacy media, Fox News, whatever, any of it. And you start to
Mm-hmm.
understand that it isn't about the Fox News versus CNN or MSNBC, that the fake prison of political dialogue, red, blue, Democrat, Republican, is breaking down very quickly, as we saw from the Epstein vote. That was a bipartisan thing. So when you think of it in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what Saifedean was talking about, what persuades, what actually works, what actually moves the needle, it's Bitcoiners or Republicans or Democrats amongst themselves speaking now. The legacy media is having a less and less of ability to coordinate people. And it looks like most of the congressional folks recognize that. And because they are now absolutely receiving feedback and stimulation into the system, input into the system that's outside of the legacy news, it really is a story about the weakness to persuade that the legacy news now has, that people have to start listening to other forces. we don't exist in a world where the legacy news can lay down narrative and then everybody follows. Things have moved beyond that. It is these little niche tribal networks now that spread information amongst themselves that actually penetrate, which is what is amazing about the kayfabe thing, because it's pretty much the only way to communicate into those echo chambers. Because it looks like the echo chambers have atomized completely, Democrats in one, Republicans in one, Bitcoiners in their own echo chamber, but it is an echo chamber nevertheless. How do you break free of those molds? Well, it happens with these types of characters and narratives and storylines.
And it's not surprising you said 70% said that they're not interested in legacy media. Well, it's because nobody can trust legacy media anymore because these big corporations are beholden to big money that's behind them, and nobody feels like they're getting the real story. So that's why you're seeing the emergence of all these individual personalities that people tune to, because it's a lot easier to hold one person accountable than it is a whole news network when you know there are things that that person who's giving you the news on those has no control over. So that's why we have things like RoxomTV that are popping up that are featuring, we have individual personalities, because someone's going to be a lot more likely to trust you every day that they're seeing, knowing that you're talking from you and not being beholden to bigger external forces. So makes a lot of sense. All right, we're moving on to the next one, and this one's spicy here. So the White House rolled out the red carpet yesterday, the tuxedos, the emerald green gown, and apparently the world's fanciest pistachio-crusted lamb for a black-tie dinner between President Donald Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The dinner was notable not only for its level of glitz and glam, but also because it followed years of global scrutiny after the CIA concluded the prince had ordered the 2018 assassination of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Now, the Saudi government initially denied involvement in Khashoggi's disappearance before eventually charging agents linked to the prince while rejecting his direct involvement. Now, Trump defended the prince earlier in the day, saying he knew nothing about the killing. And throughout the day, the two exchanged significant investment promises. Trump had previously secured $600 billion in Saudi commitments. At the dinner, that price increased to $1 trillion. The two countries also signed agreements on civil nuclear energy and the sale of F-35 fighter jets. Now, Trump also announced that he was designating Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally, a significant military and strategic designation. He said he kept the announcement secret until dinner for added effect. A dinner that drew CEOs, Elon Musk's first White House appearance in nearly a couple of months, and sports stars, including Cristiano Ronaldo, who plays for Saudi club Al Nassr. Now, Trump called the day a huge success and described the prince as a partner for peace and prosperity in both countries and the Middle East. We're bringing Nolan back. Nolan, you've tracked geopolitical capital flows for years. What does a $1 trillion Saudi investment commitment tell you about the power realignment happening worldwide? Is this money about economics or about hedging against a shifting global order? What are your thoughts?
No, I think the two most important allies America has right now are Japan and Saudi Arabia. They're the two most vital strategic partners America has for a variety of reasons. And you mentioned the Khashoggi thing. That was part of it. That already started in Trump's first mandate, of course, when you saw Shakeup bone sawed. I mean, they bone sawed him, right? They brought him into an embassy and he didn't leave the embassy. They chopped him into pieces. It was all very disgusting. And it's clear that the Saudi government killed him, right? And Trump did run cover for them, right? He definitely ran cover, and in a bit of an IOU situation. If you remember when Joe Biden fist bumped him, it was because of Khashoggi that he couldn't shake hands with, what this character was. Now, if you understand a bit of the history of Saudi Arabia, there's a sort of a quirk in there. I read a great book many years ago called The Looming Tower. It was written by the same fellow who actually created the movie in the United States. What was it called? The Siege. Remember The Siege? It was like a movie in the 90s with Bruce Willis and Denzel Washington. It was a big hit. And it was written in the late 90s and produced in the late 90s. And if you remember a bit of the story, it was Islamic terrorism was a part of the story. And so the writer of this book, or what became what was the movie, The Siege, he chose Muslims randomly to make the movie. And then when they threatened, after the movie came out, they said Islamophobia, what is all of this? And they actually killed one of the co-writers of the movie. And so this guy ended up winning the Pulitzer because when 9/11 happened, he moved to Saudi Arabia and traced the family history of the bin Ladens. It's one of the great books of 9/11 and what happened and how to understand really what was going on. The main thing you take out of that was something called the Muslim Brotherhood, which really came from Egypt. Now, Saudi, when they got into all this oil money, didn't really have an educated class. They didn't have scholars, they didn't have teachers, they didn't have any of that stuff because they were suddenly rich and they really were tribesmen and now they had all this money. So what they did was they imported a lot of Egyptian teachers. They imported the Muslim Brotherhood by another name. It was sort of where a lot of the educators had gone. And a lot of that came into Saudi Arabia in that era. They actually raised Osama bin Laden from an educational point of view. And you get a sense of bin Laden absolutely not as some crazy psychopath in the book. You start to see that he would remind us of a lot of revivalist Christians in America. He sort of went against his dad about how many wives he had. He wasn't gonna. There was like a joke they would divorce in the night and then remarry in the morning because they would be cycling through wives all the time. They were not like that at all. They had a lot to say about all this. And if you read the story, you find out very quickly that the education and all the things that Saudi absorbed from other countries had actually started to metastasize and create real problems in their society, which is where this book goes to when it comes to 9/11. What exactly happened? Why was Saudi Arabia so involved? And what you find out is there is absolutely very dangerous elements within Saudi culture, within Saudi society, that MBS explicitly said they tried to exercise with all of this stuff. Now, it's not for us. I don't know what's going on over there. They didn't like Khashoggi. Khashoggi had family ties. It wasn't so simple as just a journalist. But Trump absolutely ran cover for it. So that's not in denial. But it has a lot to do with Saudi's own maturation. It's a sovereign country. And if you look at the history of Trump's relations with them, the Khashoggi story goes right back to Trump's original visit there in 2017 when they did the sword dance. And from there, a lot of people think the Las Vegas shooting has a lot to do with what happened with MBS and their own internal civil war inside of Saudi Arabia. So, not all of that is out there. Not all of that is being reported by mainstream or legacy news, but most people have filled in the blanks and been able to. I think there was even a video that came out this week about the Las Vegas shooting where you see a helicopter and a muzzle firing from a helicopter. Now, fake videos all the time on AI, so it means nothing.
Yeah.
But there's this whole story about the history of Saudi Arabia, and if it's true that Saudi Arabia has undergone the types of changes that MBS is suggesting, then they are naturally America's number one ally because of the energy. And in the Joe Biden years, we actually saw Saudi Arabia saddle up closer to the BRICS folks, saddle up closer to
Hmm.
creating alternative markets for energy outside of the US dollar. And that's really where it all comes down to. The US dollar hegemony really is a function of guaranteed buying from the Japanese and the Saudis. Those two countries are integral for the US dollar system, for the energy system, and America has to treat those allies differently. And this is just a case of that. And all of this Saudi Arabia entourage, Ronaldo and everybody coming over, was really about. And if you notice this morning, Saudi Arabia announced after all these things that happened last night, they said a lot of this AI and the energy is going towards Bitcoin mining, and they're starting their own Bitcoin mines. So this is a clear sign that Saudi Arabia is throwing its lot in with America, and that America's own whatever's going on, energy, Bitcoin, US dollars, they're in for it. They're going to support the American worldview on these things and are not going to keep putting literally liquidity of oil over onto a Shanghai market priced in renminbi and traded on the Shanghai market. So it allows this idea that America is going to wind down the empire in a gentle way to have a lot of credibility. So that's more or less why Trump has always done this. He's always felt it was more important to be friends with someone like Rocket Man Kim in North Korea or Putin
Hmm.
or any of these folks, because fist bumps aren't really going to make a difference anyway. And in the end, I mean, Joe Biden went over there asking for stuff and they wouldn't even pick up the phone call. went away from the US dollar deal and created a lot of trouble for the US dollar. So that's what I see. And again, going back to this idea of the president being the leader of the free world, that's a World War II thing. I don't think that really applies anymore. I mean, we had Joe Biden, who was barely the leader of his own office, let alone the free world. And
Mm.
more and more people acknowledging that Trump isn't their president has a benefit to changing the character and the role of the job. And if they have to make commercial arrangements because it's good for business, then that's what separation of money and state ends up looking like, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, this is an interesting one to me. I mean, I understand the strategic element to it, but part of me wonders, is this maybe an instance of like keep your friends close, but your enemies, quote unquote, closer? I don't know, just given that you said the temperature seemingly was a lot different with the Saudis during the Biden administration. And then you got to remember there was that huge uproar with Live Golf because of the Saudi human rights violations, I think they were talking about. So it's a really interesting spot right here. And this dinner happened, despite those lingering global outrages over the Jamal Khashoggi thing that you spoke of. So my question to you is, what does the world's willingness to move past that say about how power and money and morality are colliding in global geopolitics right now? Because it certainly seems like we're having to make some sacrifices in certain areas to get advantages in others right now.
Well, I guess it would go back to not seeing any of these people as innocent. I mean, was Joe Biden innocent? It's like what Trump used to say, we're not so innocent too. Remember when Trump was talking about that in relation to Putin, years ago?
Mm.
This idea that we even have politicians to choose from that aren't involved in the difficult decisions of killing individuals and all of that stuff. None of these people are innocent. We don't live in a system where there's good guys and bad guys in a comic book way, right? These are people that have very
Right.
difficult choices to make. I think we're more just wising up to having an innocent idea, like Joe Biden was the leader of the free world. I mean, that's what seems most absurd, that we would even try to
Mm.
think of this guy as the leader of the free world. I know there's a video out today where you get a bunch of congressional, like former, CIA, Elise Slotkin from Michigan, the senator was a CIA officer, and anyone who's in the armed forces coming out today saying, doing this video saying, if you're in the military, you don't have to listen to the president. You don't have to listen to these things. And, that all might be true. But in the case of understanding their ability to persuade, understanding their ability to actually get people on their side, it was a zero. It was literally zero. It wouldn't change anyone's mind. And these are the people who are saying we don't want civilian control of the military. Well, did we even have civilian control of the military under the Joe Biden years? How long has it been since we've actually had civilian control of the military? We don't really know the answer to those questions. The military industrial complex has become so powerful that having a president who's sort of a dawdling, I've got dementia, that's perfect. I mean,
Yeah.
they didn't choose him because he was, not because he was able to stand up to it. They chose him because he didn't even know where he was. That made him
Yeah.
perfect candidate for president. So you don't want that situation. That to me seems a lot worse. Not being able to identify who's making decisions in a White House seems to be the logical extreme end of the relationship between Congress, power, morality. We're not, I don't think politicians ever should have been people you look to for morality. They're not really there for that. The job should be way less sexy than it has turned into. It should be way less relevant than it turned into. And again, having a president whose subtitle for their job is leader of the free world is probably where we got into trouble in the first place. I mean, the president should sign a few deals and mostly chill out like a king. And that was the way George Washington set up the job. And it was that way until World War One. And then suddenly this whole new world became what we're living in, where the president was needed for world peace. That was not what the founding fathers had in
Hmm.
mind. It was like, get
Yeah.
involved when you absolutely need to, otherwise chill out. And here's a limited tool set of powers, use them sparingly. And that's not what it turned into. It
Hmm.
turned into big, long speeches and rallying troops and all that stuff. And then we don't even know where the discretion of the president as commander in chief goes away. I mean, we can't really pinpoint it. Was Nixon really the president? I mean, who knows, right? He got
Yeah.
he got shanghaied pretty quick by people who didn't want Vietnam to end. And so you have this
Hmm.
whole historical context of the job of the president, which looks more like window dressing than ever before. And Trump exposed that by, was Trump really the president in his first term? I mean, he didn't get anything done. He didn't build a wall. He didn't do
Yeah.
anything. He tried. I mean, he couldn't do it, but he tried. And we just don't
Yeah.
live in that world, right?
Yeah, I would love to hear you ask him if the wall got built. I'd be curious to hear what his answer would be because he really is the king of deflection, but that's for another time. All right, let's move on to this next story. The UK is calling it a new era of threat, which is diplomatic language for Russia is doing weird stuff again. Britain's defense secretary announced that a Russian spy ship, the Yantar, has been slipping in and out of British waters for weeks now. He says this ship is designed specifically for intelligence gathering and mapping undersea cables. And this time, instead of quietly snooping around undersea cables like it normally does, the crew upgraded to shining lasers at British military pilots. Yeah, actual lasers at pilots in UK airspace. The Yantar's latest stunt is part of a bigger pattern of Russia incursions into NATO territory. Russian drones have also been spotted recently over Poland and Belgium. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, there's tension between the UK and Brussels. You see, the European Union wants the UK to contribute between 4.5 and 6.5 billion pounds, or euro, to a new European defense fund called SAFE. The UK instead is only offering between 2 and 300 million. Bringing Nolan back. Nolan, Russia is mapping undersea cables again, basically the circulatory system of the internet. From your systems perspective, how vulnerable is a modern world to a single actor messing with that type of infrastructure?
Oh, big time. But I want to even talk about the way Russia is targeting England in what you're talking about with the undersea cables and the
Yeah.
navies and stuff like that, because I read a lot of the description of what's going on, especially from Russian propaganda. But what is interesting from the Russian propaganda is that they underlined England, right, as the main, let's say, the country that is currently most interested in war. And they even mentioned that in Russia today, Anglo-Saxon, calling someone Anglo-Saxon has become a slur. It used to just denote sort of a people from a part of the world, like an ethnic thing, right? Now it's become a slur in
Yeah.
Russia. And the reason is what they describe in this, and in the press, not press release, but in describing what they were up to, I forget where I read it from, but I read it yesterday, so it's still in my head and was related to the story, is that they say, again, it's proper official propaganda channels. They talk about how
Hmm.
England was the main belligerent in 1914 to bring the world to war, the country most aching for World War One and World War Two. So what's important about that is that at any other time in this World War Two consensus, and everything that happened after, Russia would have chosen first up the Nazis and the Germans as the enemy, because that's who they fought against in World War One and World War Two. So they would have always described,
Hmm.
especially the Soviet Union, would have described the Nazis as the main belligerent that started World War Two, to which they had to respond and to which they heroically won. And
Hmm.
so they identified England this time as and that's why the Anglo-Saxon thing has become a slur, because Russia's enemy has now turned from America to England. They don't even think about America as an enemy any longer. They think of England and the bankers and all these people as the actual enemy. And that's what was interesting about the propaganda released about this story in Russia, was that England had changed characters historically from what they're used to identifying as the belligerent. It used to be Germany, now England. It used to be America, now England. And so what you're really seeing here is, I've been talking about this World War II consensus model for a long time, and what the World War II consensus looks like. Of course, in my mind, and I share a whiteboard a lot on my show, where you see a scale and you see the Nazi flag, and then you see the institutions on that side, and these decentralized institutions. And that was reality. Nazis bad, these forces good. What you're seeing from this story is that even the Russians, who were formerly the Soviets, are completely changing their World War II perspective about who the belligerents were, who the bad team was. Now, again, I don't believe that the opposite of the World War II consensus is true. You see a lot of people fall into that online. Oh, actually, the Nazis, it was not, you're seeing people fall for that. The Jews are behind everything and all this stuff, right? Truthfully, I think where
Yeah.
we're going to head to this is where we came from before, which is great men of history, great women of history, not institutions leading the way. going back to what looks more like the system in Russia before any of these revolutions. And that doesn't mean democracy. They were not a democracy. They were a monarchy. And Putin runs it more or less like a monarchy, Saudi Arabia being a monarchy. Even whatever the president is turning into in America, it's not going to be the same as it was. And so you've got this pretty interesting, I think, reshuffling of worldviews, even from Russia, and it's showing England, the British banks, and all of the things that come out of BBC. I saw yesterday Mike Ben Cyber did 4 hours on the history of the BBC, following the money. They called it the New Marshall Plan, which was a media initiative to brainwash Eastern Europeans after the fall of communism to make them very pro-American. It looks like none of that is working, and the BBC and that money, as you know, people are following it and figuring it out. So big changes in
Mm.
worldview, I think, is the main story here.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. I know the BBC's also in some hot water, and we're going to talk about it in the second half of today's show with some kind of Trump documentary. I think that came out where they pretty much edited it in a way that insinuated he was calling for violence during the January 6th, incursion. And yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on there. The world's a weird place right now. Let's move on to the next one here. As investors are treating today's Nvidia's earnings call like it's the moment they find out whether the AI boom is real. Markets have already been sliding from a tech sell-off fueled by fears of an AI bubble. The S&P and the Dow are both slipping, and everyone is staring at Nvidia like it's the one kid holding up the entire group project. You see, Nvidia is unique because while most AI companies have sky-high valuations and tiny revenues, Nvidia actually sells the physical chips powering all those AI models. If there's an AI gold rush, Nvidia is the one selling the shovels, and they're very expensive shovels. And it worked. You see, Nvidia recently hit a $5 trillion valuation, but that also means if Nvidia cracks, the rest of the AI sector and a big chunk of the US economy propped up by that data center spending could fall with it. Now, meanwhile, the Magnificent Seven tech giants now make up over a third of the S&P 5, so nerves right now are pretty high. Even Nvidia is wobbling. Its stock has dropped in the past week and fell sharply yesterday, signaling just how anxious investors are ahead of today's earnings call. Bringing back Nolan. Nolan, investors are treating Nvidia like the keystone holding up the entire AI cathedral. Is that a healthy market structure or the definition of fragility? I'm worried.
Well, if it was a normal market, I would say that it looks overhyped and way too hot and a runaway train. But the AI thing is almost becoming industrial policy. It's almost like what aerospace was in the 1950s. It doesn't quite fit into the economy the way, textiles would, or because it's really about energy finance. It's really about how you pay for the build out of energy going forward. And that's one of the big things that Bitcoin mining brought. And that's why you keep seeing all these Bitcoin mining stories associated with the data center stories because they work together. There's a peak load thing of AI, right? It's just like, when the school's out, people don't use it as much. When it's night, they don't use it as much. So it's a lot like air
Right.
conditioning and it requires load balancing. And so because it is more like industrial policy and less like just some industry that's got hype, like not even .com in the 90s was industrial policy. The AI and the energy build out and the reshoring of manufacturing, they're not trying to reshore things you make at the dollar store. They're trying to reshore microchips and critical pieces of infrastructure. So this has almost all the telltale signs of military industrial policy, which means that you can't really measure it in the same way that you'd measure a normal industry. There's not just backstop there, there's entire will of the country, the entire will of the system. So I get why people are saying it's a bubble. It could very well become one, if the money really fails, if there's some other cataclysm on the sides of this industrial policy, then sure, it could become a problem. But because it's more like the space race in the 1950s, and the space race in the
Mm.
1950s was all about gobbling up money. They didn't really care. It didn't matter. Everything else ended up going up as a result of all the breakthroughs of that we got from industrial aerospace favoritism, jets and stuff like that. We didn't, it used to be you had to fly in a little propeller plane until the 1950s when all of this stuff became national policy. And that's where you get the Boeing 747s and the intercontinental jets that didn't exist before. And that's why, all these little airports, like I guess the one you guys have in Oakland that used to be the main airport of the country. I forget what it's called, but it's the one right, on the shore, or LaGuardia in New
Yeah,
York,
I know
or
what you're talking about.
Reagan in DC. Yeah, all of these airports were built for, propeller planes. When the jets came along, it changed everything. So, um, because it's like aerospace 1950s and not really like tech 1990s. Tech 1990s was this is Pokemon. They got lucky and people were excited. It was hobbyists, it was nerds. This has the entire focus of the American system behind it. This is Texas Energy. This is everybody. This is Silicon Valley. This is Wall Street. This is DC. That's what's building this AI boom, not a couple tinkerers in a garage in Palo Alto. So the importance to the national policy, to me, says it's different than a normal bubble.
That's super interesting because I've heard plenty of people compare this to the dot-com bubble. That's the one that seemingly everyone goes to. But the space race is a really interesting comparison there because it's like we don't really know what it's ultimately going to do. We just got to beat everybody else to do it because if someone else does it first, we could all be in trouble. And Nvidia, we're waiting for this earnings call today, and the market's kind of collectively holding their breath about it because I would love to know what you think, what kind of like cascading effects could we realistically see if the numbers aren't meeting expectations? Are we talking a full tech sell-off or maybe full-on macro tremors? Like, what do you think would happen if today doesn't meet expectations?
Oh, it can go that far. I mean, it goes right to the backstop of it being industrial policy. It'll go right to Besant's office if anything happens. I mean, this is more vital than Saudi Arabia or Japan or any of that. They're all relying on America. I mean, that's what they sold them yesterday were the chips, right? That's what Ben Solomon came to get
Yeah.
was the chips. So no, if anything happens, it goes straight to Besant and it's a vroom vroom brrr printer because there's no other way around it. Again, it is more like the space race in that the entire, I mean, it would be like war measures, right? They would tell you to bring in your steel or your aluminum and recycle. We would be put on rations if something goes wrong, right?
Sure.
So it's
Yeah.
that vital to the country. So it's not the same as and because of that, people will I think psychologically not let it go to that extreme because even if it's disappointing, people will rationalize their way around it. They say, "Oh, next time," right? Because it's you don't want to face the reality of this thing falling down. And nevertheless, there is a fiat apocalypse coming. I think the fiat apocalypse is more related to real estate, which is a generational thing, not industrial policy, not national security policy. It's one demographic of, boomers that Trump doesn't care about anyway because they didn't help him, and he says it all the time, don't care about them. Don't buy house, I want houses to be cheap. I want them to be cheap. I want the price to come down. That is basically telling a demographic to, bugger off. And so I do think we're going to get some form of fiat apocalypse, but it won't come from AI. That's just my instinct when it comes to how important it is. You'll see the country bend over backwards from stopping anything like Nvidia suffering in a way that would create a global contagion. And so psychologically, it's just too much for people to handle because then it's OpenAI comes down and then bang, 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 and it doesn't end. So I think you'd have the entire system creating narrative cohesion around this, even if the earnings don't come, even if the numbers are below. You'll have people hallucinate that they'll be high. You'll have people lie to themselves, more or less. And, we are going to have corrections, but I think it is in those industries that are structurally not important to whatever is getting built here in this new world system. So I do think you're going to see it in places like real estate, and we're going to get a fiat apocalypse. Everyone should just enjoy the the road until then. But I don't think it'll be from an
Yeah.
earnings call from Nvidia.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that because I can only buy the dip so many times until I'm actually catching a falling knife. So we'll see how that actually plays out. But there are a lot of people out there that are using this as a buying opportunity. I want to talk about them right now because Bitcoin whales have apparently decided that the only appropriate response to a market meltdown is to buy more Bitcoin, because why experience fear when you can hoard digital coins like a dragon with a hardware wallet? Now, Glassnode data shows that whales started scooping up BTC again in late October, with a very noticeable spike beginning Friday in wallets holding more than 1,000 Bitcoin. You see, late last month, whales wallets hit a yearly low of 1,354 when Bitcoin was trading around 114K. This week, that number jumped 2.2% to 1,384, which is the highest level in nearly 4 months. Meanwhile, smaller holders with 1 Bitcoin or more haven't been loving the price action quite as much. Their total count fell to a yearly low of 977,420 earlier this week. Now, executives from Bitwise and Bitmine, however, expect the selling pressure to fade. Bitwise CIO Matt Hogan says the current price level is a generational opportunity. Gemini co-founder Cameron Winklevoss insists that this is the last time you'll ever be able to buy Bitcoin below 90K. So in summary, the whales are buying, the small holders are sweating, and Bitcoin is doing exactly what Bitcoin does, terrifying people on the way to making them wealthier. We're bringing Nolan back. Nolan, whales are buying aggressively during extreme fear is classic Bitcoin behavior. What does this tell you about who actually understands Bitcoin's long-term design and who's just riding on vibes right now?
Well, I wouldn't prescribe so much understanding of the different groups. I think a lot of the plebs are just tapped out. It's like you said, they've been buying the dip. I think most Bitcoiners who are holding, sub 1 Bitcoin or just over 1 Bitcoin are as invested as people holding thousands in terms of how much money you actually have to even, how you would store it. I think it's 90 something percent for both groups. I think we're in an economy right now, though, that is absolutely favoring people with property, people with leverage, people with ownership of things. And so it's just the same thing that's happening throughout society. Rich are getting richer, and the people who have to work all day to pay for their Bitcoin and buy their Bitcoin or however else they get it are, like most Americans, still suffering from the cost of living increase, the dramatic inflation we've seen in consumable goods in America. So I think psychologically, everyone's still on the same page. It's not really a rich or poor. It's systemically what's happening we've only really got reinforcements for the large Bitcoin holders who have been able to either borrow in order to pay for their lifestyle up until this point, or any one of the other scenarios. So it's just more of the what we've understood for a long time, the separation, the haves and the have-nots, the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer. So I think this is all blended into that storyline. And what does it say about Bitcoin? Look, Bitcoin is manipulated heavily by whales. This has been the case for a long time. Every single era, you see people manipulating the price. Bitcoin price action, the network itself, the P2P information network, how it works, the data on Bitcoin, the hash rate, all of it continuing to show that we're on a trajectory to completely change the financial system. At the same time, you've got all these folks that are still within the turbulent death pangs of the fiat system and are cash strapped, right? But the good news is, I mean, we see that there is sort of a sovereign game that is underway, that people, even if they're holding between 1 and 2 or even less than 1 Bitcoin, these people are still taking those risks to not be too far into the fiat system for whatever calamity that is set to befall that system. So you've got people that are seeing this in terms of, what kind of freedom over my day and time do I have? And people embracing that, even the ones who don't have a lot of Bitcoin. More or less, a sort of anti-fragile posture over what could happen to jobs with AI and the fiat system. So, Bitcoin definitely being manipulated, definitely whales taking advantage, same old story. But the psychology of the minnows and the small holders, I think, is consistent and on the same path it's always been.
Okay, that's good to hear. And you've said in the past that Bitcoin exposes the weaknesses of traditional systems. So is Bitcoin's sharp drop that we've seen and then immediate whale response just another example of Bitcoin acting as kind of a canary in the coal mine for broader risk assets right now?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Especially, I saw CZ doing an interview yesterday talking even about the nation state adoption and what it means. So just like we said, this, Saudi Arabia accumulating this morning. We heard UAE bought a bunch more Bitcoin last week. We saw El Salvador buy 1,000 Bitcoin this
Yeah.
week as well. So a big, huge purchase over there. And the Czech central bank, not buying a ton, but testing the waters openly and publicly.
Right.
And, so CZ gave this interview with some from Pakistan, the digital minister of something, something, something. I've met him before. He was at the Bitcoin conference. I can't remember his name or his title exactly, but they were doing an
Mm-hmm.
interview. And CZ explicitly said, even on the nation state level, countries that don't adopt it are headed the way to lose their sovereignty, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
take Argentina, for example. Argentina, who just had its whole balance sheet more or less absorbed, the peso balance sheet absorbed by the United States. And the first question people ask is, what does this do to Argentina's sovereignty? Well, a lot. Like, well, they don't get to borrow on their terms anymore. They don't get to make a lot of decisions about how they're going to fund their government. So you can tell right away that this scenario that CZ is talking about, this sovereignty, the individual sovereignty that countries can embrace through Bitcoin is the main story, and it's the story on the personal level as well. So that's how I see it
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and we'll see how it plays out. Today's a big one. It's not the end all be all with Nvidia, but a lot of things going on right now, and we'll see how it all plays out. But as always, Nolan, we're so happy and grateful that you're able to join us this morning. It's always an absolute treat getting to hear your insights and your wealth of knowledge. So we always appreciate you joining us and sharing that with us today. And hey, man, I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday, and thanks again for stopping in with us.
Hank, I love stepping in. It's becoming a highlight of my day, and I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll have a good time doing it again.
Oh, man after my own heart. Great having you. We'll see you tomorrow, Nolan. Appreciate you. All right, we're taking a quick break here at the Blockchain Report, but when we're back, we got more of today's top news that you're not going to want to miss, or you're going to be the dumb one of all your friends. So stay tuned. Blockchain Report coming back your way right after this.
Others, Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising. The dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index is collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed two brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
All right, we're back with another market rundown. Bitcoin has dipped below that 90K mark just briefly. We're hanging on for dear life. And as we talked about earlier with Nolan, I think a big part of what is going to determine where we go the rest of today is that Nvidia's earnings call, as that is going to seemingly have repercussions that echo throughout the entire market right now. But the good news is Nvidia is actually up on the day, which is making me think that investors are feeling bullish heading into this call. But of course, we won't actually know anything until the call drops later today, and we'll keep you abreast as long as we get more info on that. But now it's time to get in more of today's top news with our bull run, so let's get back into it. All right, we're back with more of this morning's bull run, and we're getting into what is the kind of soup du jour of the day, and of course that is the Epstein fallout that we are seeing, and it's expanding like a bad franchise sequel. And the latest person to get pulled into this blast radius is Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary, former Harvard president, and now former OpenAI board member. You see, Summers resigned from OpenAI after new revelations showed extensive communication between him and Epstein, including email exchanges that were recently released. One of the emails reportedly involved Summers seeking Epstein's advice about a relationship with a woman. Uh-oh. Now Summers released a statement saying he's stepping away from public commitments and that resigning from the OpenAI board is part of that move. OpenAI's board also issued a statement saying Summers made the decision himself. But politically, the pressure was already mounting. You see, lawmakers from both parties demanded institutions cut ties with Summers after the email revelations surfaced. And now, the Epstein scandal, which has already consumed politicians, billionaires, celebrity associates, and anyone unlucky enough to appear in a flight log, is officially knocking on the door of the AI industry too. And Cathie Wood, you know her, and she's back at it again, rearranging her portfolio like she's playing high-stakes Tetris with tech companies and crypto. You see, after the recent Bitcoin dip, Cathie even lowered her Bitcoin price prediction from 1.5 million to 1.2 million, which for Cathie Wood counts as being cautious. It's all part of her strategy to rebalance when the winds shift, which seems to be every 14 minutes in the current market. You see, earlier this week, ARK Invest dumped $3 million worth of Reddit shares across two funds. They also unloaded more than $618,000 worth of Pinterest shares. Both social media giants have been getting hit in the broader tech sell-off as of late, and Cathie basically said, "Not my problem, gang," and walked away. Instead, ARK picked up $10 million worth of Peter Thiel's Bullish shares, a company that operates a hybrid crypto trading platform for institutions. So Cathie Wood sold two social networks, bought a Cayman Islands-based institutional crypto exchange backed by Peter Thiel, and did it all while the tech sector was basically reenacting a fire drill. This is why people watch what she buys. She's either early, brilliant, or maybe both, and either way, the rest of the market keeps copying her homework. And the SEC has released its plans for 2026, and the US agency ghosted Bitcoin. No digital assets, no blockchain. Instead, the SEC is focusing on things like AI, surprise, algorithms, automated advice, data security, identity theft, and anti-money laundering. Basically, every hot topic except the one it used to be obsessed over for years. The timing makes sense once you look at the political backdrop right now. Early 2025 brought a major White House shift towards supporting digital assets, limiting federal work on CBDCs, and launching a president's working group on digital asset markets. There was also a fact sheet about building a strategic Bitcoin reserve and a national digital asset stockpile. Now at the SEC, leadership has changed too. Paul Atkins became chair, and he leans lighter touch when it comes to regulation. And you can already see the effects too. The SEC settled the Ripple case with a smaller, narrower outcome. It closed the Robinhood crypto investigation without charges. It even moved to dismiss its lawsuit against Coinbase. Or in other words, the era of SEC versus crypto civil war seems to be ending. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is doing the opposite. The European Union's MiCA rules are fully active. The UK is building new regulated activities for crypto. Hong Kong is expanding its licensing regime. Singapore's stablecoin framework is already in effect. So while other regions are building full crypto rulebooks, the SEC is basically saying, "Nah, fam, we're good," which is surprising. And according to crypto entrepreneur Mike Alfred, the US government isn't loading up its strategic Bitcoin reserve anytime soon, or at least not until other countries blink first. You see, Alfred said on a podcast this week that the US will start putting Bitcoin into the reserve created earlier this year when there is enough pressure externally. Or, in other words, the US wants other nations to make the first move so that it doesn't look like it's panic buying Bitcoin at the top, like someone's uncle discovering Bitcoin at Thanksgiving dinner. Talking to you, Uncle Tim. Now, Alfred said once the government realizes other nations are already accumulating BTC, that's when things will likely accelerate, but the exact timeline is, of course, completely up in the air. President Trump already signed an executive order in March establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve framework and directing the government to find budget-neutral ways to accumulate BTC. But the actual reserve still hasn't been formally stood up. And speaking of Trump, he's getting some pushback this morning for calling a reporter piggy on Air Force One. Now, this happened during a press gaggle where Bloomberg reporter Catherine Lucy used her very limited time with the president to ask about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal and why Trump was behaving the way he was if there was nothing incriminating in the files. Now, before she could finish, he pointed at her and said, "Quiet, quiet, piggy." And journalists began reacting like Trump had personally insulted journalism itself. CNN's Jake Tapper called the remark disgusting and completely unacceptable. Former Fox News anchor Gretchen Carlson also called it disgusting and degrading, completing the extremely rare cable news united in disgust crossover event. Now, Bloomberg responded with a statement saying their journalists perform a vital public service and will continue covering issues fairly and accurately, which is corporate PR speak for "we're not touching this with a 10-foot pole." A White House official pushed back and claimed the reporter behaved inappropriately toward colleagues, but provided absolutely no evidence when asked for any kind of specifics. So now we have journalists that are outraged, political opponents are outraged, supporters are deflecting, and a single word, piggy, doing exactly what every political advisor fears, dominating the news cycle for the next 24 hours. And speaking of Trump, while he's dealing with all this piggy nonsense, he's meanwhile focusing his attention on BBC documentaries, specifically one that he's now threatening to sue the BBC for. Now, this all stems from a documentary called Trump, Second Chance, where the BBC edited one of Trump's January 6 speeches in a way that made it look like he was calling for violent action. The BBC has since apologized, but they're not offering compensation. So Trump responded by saying, "We'll sue them." Very on brand. He also claimed that the BBC cheated by changing the words coming out of his mouth, adding that this edit was worse than what CBS did with Kamala. Meanwhile, the fallout inside the BBC has been brutal. Their news director resigned after the review found the documentary edit made Trump appear to be encouraging violence. Now, Trump said he plans to discuss the issue with the UK Prime Minister this weekend and claimed that the people of the UK are very angry because this proves the BBC is fake news. Trump says the lawsuit is coming next week, and with the price tag somewhere between billion and $5 billion, the BBC may need more than a strongly worded press release to defuse this one. All right, we're taking a quick break, but when we're back, we got more blockchain report. We're going to check out what's going on X and see what's trending and talk about it and much more. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after this quick message. All right, welcome back to the blockchain report. It's now time for the scroll patrol. This is where we go on to X and see what is happening in real time and then talk about it. Let's get to it. So the first one we got here, this is a tweet from Loshmi saying the Bitcoin price today, 89,971. I think it's even a little lower right now. And that of a year ago, where it was actually a little bit higher. Certainly not the news bulls like you and I were hoping to see at this time of the year. I think we all had dreams of, I don't know, right now around 140K or something. And when those have been some unfulfilled dreams as of yet, but remember there's a lot of macro factors at play right now that are certainly suppressing the price. But again, remember, see, look what's going on here, gang. We got institutions and the whales are coming back and scooping up Bitcoin on the cheap. El Salvador just bought another 1,000. MicroStrategy just a couple of days ago made their biggest purchase in months. I think it was something close to just under 9,000 Bitcoin. So, let's not buy into the FUD here, guys. We got this AI bubble that's potentially looming, and all of that is having an effect on the immediate Bitcoin price. But the underlying narratives are the exact same as they've been all year. We got institutional money is gobbling up all of the Bitcoin that's being unlifted by OGs that are finally cashing out because, people need money. So while the price right now doesn't reflect where we thought it would be earlier this year, the mission and the narrative is still the same. This is just some short-term FUD that we're going to see before the next big bounce, because where we are now as opposed to where we were a year ago, an entirely different landscape. Let's scroll to the next one here. What else we got? We got Michael Saylor. He's saying Bitcoin adoption is unstoppable, and President of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, just gave a handshake thing. I mean, these two guys know where it's going. They've literally put all of their money where their mouths are. So much smarter than me. Their conviction is undeniable, and so is yours, little sailor angel. All right, let's scroll down, see what else we got here, gang. Okay, so this one's kind of funny. This was the selfie from last night's dinner at the White House. I don't know. Given the cast of characters there, this is either great or it's like a bunch of supervillains taking a selfie together. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo, he's fine. I'm a fan. Who else we got there? You got Elon. He's looking a little red in the face. Might have had a little too much to drink last night. I think we got David Sachs back there. So quite the cast of characters. It reminds me of that Ellen one at the Oscars years ago, and they're all just kind of creeping in the best they can. So yeah, that dinner was interesting. Again, we spoke about it earlier on the show with Nolan. It's certainly an interesting play given the reputation Saudi has had, especially here in America the last couple of years, you know, with being accused of multiple human rights violations. We had, as we briefly touched on earlier, the PGA Tour and Live Golf separating golf and kind of fracturing it into two different things, and players taking enormous payouts to leave the PGA to go to Live Golf because of all the Saudi money there. So it just seems to kind of, to me, being another one of those instances that money truly talks, and we will look the other way at certain things if strategically we feel like it's going to be advantageous for us to align with them long term. And as Nolan mentioned earlier in the show, between Japan and Saudi Arabia, those are the two most important allies that we have right now. So yeah, interesting dinner. I would love to learn more about it once some news leaks from it, but it's an interesting one right now. Let's scroll through. What else we got here on Scroll Patrol here, guys? We got any more? Let's see. Justin, Trump chooses the next Federal Reserve chair by Christmas. Okay, so it looks like Christmas going to be on time this year. There might be some nice rate cut presents under the table. Jerome Powell has been doing his best to manage inflation and, you know, jobs reports and whatnot, but as Trump calls him, is too late Powell, and he is itching for additional rate cuts so they can inject liquidity into the system and keep propping up this market that, let's be real, is a lot of AI money sloshing around that everybody kind of seems to be in an agreement is the formation of what could be a historically large bubble, but I don't really know just yet. So hopefully he's got someone smart in mind for this Christmas, because Santa Claus is going to be dressing up no longer as Jerome Powell, but somebody very different, and hopefully he's got some nice presents for us under the tree. All right, let's keep going here. What else do we have on? That's it. Okay, that's it for the Scroll Patrol this morning. But we're going to take a quick break, but when we're back, we got more of today's top news that you are not going to want to miss, including humanoid robots. We got AI teddy bears saying really questionable things to children. Oh, this is a magical world we live in, boys and girls, and we're going to talk about it as soon as we return right after this quick break. Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. And the Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. You can use it like any credit card. Buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee. And right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Just go to Gemini.com and learn more. All right, it's time for some AI AIO. This is the part of the show where we check out what our AI and robot overlords got in store for us next. And right now, Google found out the hard way that AI hallucinations aren't quirky little mistakes after all. In fact, they're lawsuit magnets with GPUs. Now, the company pulled its Gemma model from the AI Hub after the AI invented a full-blown story accusing Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn of rape. The model didn't respond with a simple yes when asked if she had ever been accused of such a crime. It responded with a detailed narrative about her 1987 Tennessee State Senate campaign, a state trooper, prescription drugs, and alleged non-consensual acts, all of which was completely fabricated. Now, Blackburn said the AI even generated fake links to phony news articles. When clicked, they went nowhere. Now, Blackburn released a statement saying the hallucination wasn't harmless, but an act of defamation produced and distributed by a Google-owned AI model, and she demanded Google shut it down until they could control it. Google's response: pull the plug. They argued that Gemma was intended for developers and not as a consumer chatbot, so they removed it from the AI studio. Now, Google also pushed back on claims that the model was targeting conservatives by saying the real issue is a much bigger problem. Hallucinations are inherent to the tech. Blackburn was able to get Google's attention because she's a senator, but this is the exact legal nightmare AI companies have been bracing themselves for. There are already lawsuits piling up. A Minnesota solar firm sued Google after AI Overviews falsely claimed the company was being investigated by regulators and had been accused of deceptive practices. That model also backed up its hallucinations with fake citations. The New York Times reported at least 6 defamation cases in the United States tied to AI-generated content so far. Experts are saying that hallucinations are not going away anytime soon, meaning that AI companies will keep facing legal battles while courts figure out who is actually liable here. And parents everywhere have been introduced to a horrifying new concept, the teddy bear that explains match lighting technique and sexual fetishes with the same tone as a kindergarten librarian. You see, children's toy maker Folo Toy has announced that it's pulling its AI-powered teddy bear, Kuma, after a safety group discovered that the bear apparently thought it was auditioning to be the world's worst guidance counselor. Marketing director Hugo Wu said the company is suspending sales and launching a full internal safety audit. Now, they're reviewing everything from model alignment to content filtering to data protection to child interaction safeguards, which is corporate speak for how did our bear turn into a PG-13 demon? Well, Wu added that they'll be working with outside experts to verify current and future safety features. Researchers from the Public Interest Research Group tested 3 AI toys from different companies and discovered that all of them said deeply questionable things to children. In one test, Kuma gave step-by-step instructions on how to light a match, complete with a cheerful puff like a birthday candle at the end. And that, shockingly, was not the worst part. In other conversations, Kuma offered kissing tips and launched into explicit explanations of sexual kinks, including bondage and teacher-student roleplay. It even asked the child what they thought would be the most fun to explore, proving once again that AI really should not be left unsupervised around humans, especially the tiny ones. Researchers say this is one of the clearest examples so far of how the flaws in large language models can directly impact children. Now, this comes as companies like Mattel are rolling out AI-powered toys, and as the world continues hearing reports of AI chatbots contributing to dangerous situations, including mental spirals and even deaths linked to chatbot interactions. So, for now, Kuma has been sent to the timeout corner until further notice, which is probably the safest place for a bear that hands out match lighting tutorials. Yeah, probably. And Elon Musk, he says the secret to building human-level robots isn't some Hollywood-style breakthrough. It's putting a robot in a room with toys and letting it self-play like a toddler who wandered into a daycare unsupervised. Now, Musk explained that where things get very interesting and very much like humans is when the robot is allowed to learn the way that a child does. And according to Musk, a child learns by playing with toys, playing with blocks, and repeating the same actions over and over again until they finally figure it out. So Musk says the robot should do the same thing. Give it toys, put it in a room, and let it keep trying. Now, using a classic shape sorter toy as the example, Musk described the exact task. The robot's job is to put the circle in the circle hole, the square in the square hole, the triangle in the triangle hole, you get it. And it keeps doing it again and again, until it works. And the entire reward function is built around one thing, and that is succeeding at the task. So Musk was then asked whether any big foundational AI breakthroughs were still needed to make this all work. He said there are advances that are required, but none of them are insurmountable. His optimism comes as Tesla has already shown its Optimus robot folding shirts, sorting objects, and walking more naturally than any competing humanoid robot currently on the market. Because when you've got a robot that can fold a shirt without having an emotional breakdown, apparently that counts as forward progress. And with all of those demonstrations already happening, Musk's famously ambitious timeline ends up sounding far less outlandish. Now, if Elon is correct here, the age of personal robot isn't science fiction anymore. It's mainly a matter of training. And Disney CEO Bob Iger decided to casually drop a bombshell. Disney Plus subscribers may soon be able to use generative AI to alter Disney movies and shows. Because what could possibly go wrong with giving 200 million people the power to deepfake Darth Vader, remix Elsa, or drop Mickey Mouse into Fight Club? Now, Iger framed this as user-generated content, which is adorable, as if we're all going to politely make cute little Mickey shorts instead of unleashing absolute chaos. Now, this move taps into a long history of tech trying to make stories interactive. From 1960s experiments like the Sumerian game to Black Mirror, Bandersnatch, but AI takes this from guided choices to anything goes. AI models now let you alter any personality, any scene, any storyline with a text prompt and no guardrails. Disney is basically saying, sure, go ahead, use our most valuable IP like Play-Doh, go for it. But the irony here, gang, is only 6 years ago, Disney bragged about spending billions on original content for Disney+. Now, the new selling point is feel free to rip it all up. Iger says the platform will start with mostly short form, partly because AI still struggles with continuity, and partly because calling it short form helps Wall Street visualize TikTok-style engagement. But as the tech improves, the content will inevitably get longer. And the more people become comfortable remixing established stories, the more fragile those stories become. So the real challenge? Disney's IP is almost too iconic. People might not actually want to mess with it. They may prefer AI to create new concepts and narratives, in which case Disney's massive vault of legacy content becomes less of an advantage and kind of more of a trap. There's also a deeper cultural shift at play here. AI is slowly teaching us that identities and narratives and historical figures are malleable. Deepfakes of MLK saying racist things or Stephen Hawking in an MMA ring shouldn't exist, but they do, and they normalize the idea that nothing is truly fixed. Now, Disney wants to channel that power into its own universe. The Hollywood C-suite is trying to convince investors that audiences want to mess with existing IP, that people want to graft their faces onto Darth Vader or generate alternative Marvel scenes. But nobody knows if this is actually true. Will people make new endings, entirely new films, or endless meme content? Will AI become a tool for creativity or just a weapon for mass chaos? And here's the kicker, right? AI is getting so good that tonight's screening of Jurassic Park might include Ian Malcolm saying something he never actually said and nobody would even blink. Jeff Goldblum warned us decades ago that scientists worry about could instead of should. And Disney seems committed to could. Now the world has to wait and see what happens when Mickey Mouse meets Sora 2. All right, Victor, I want to talk with you about this one. This is particularly interesting because I feel like we are at this pivotal point, an inflection point, where this could change media entirely going forward. So I would just like to know, from a consumer's perspective, is this something that even interests you? Would you want to mess with existing Disney IP and change it up, or maybe insert yourself or your friends, or change storylines? Like, is that something you're even into?
I think it would be fun to get, like be in a Disney movie and insert yourself or your friends. My only concern, I think it's kind of the reason I think they're doing this is so like they can get ideas from people. So like once they're using, they're using your AI, you probably have to like go through something that you have to agree that any new ideas that come up with it, they own. So if they come up with a good idea using their characters or something new, they can make like a feature-long movie or whatever, and they can say like, oh, well, we own that property, and they don't have to pay any creators for it now. And you're paying for the service, so you're basically
right
getting screwed. Yeah,
they're hitting you from every angle with this one. And I think you're totally right. And we're seeing it. And I know you're a big movie buff. We're seeing it in cinema today. It's just like everybody is regurgitating the same ideas. There's that new Mona movie that I think only came out in 2016.
Moana.
And now they're already, Moana, right. And now they're making a live action version with The Rock. It hasn't even been 10 years. Like it used to be remakes we at least let sit on the shelf, or like an original for 30 years. And it's like, okay, let's bring back The Lion King, live action or something. And now they're just like, well, this worked 10 years ago. Let's just recycle it. And it's interesting, right? Because, go ahead.
Yeah, it made sense at first because it's like, oh, you miss these characters. There's a new, well, it's the same story, but like at least you're retelling it for a new generation, right? Because they would, like you said, like the differences between 10, 20 years, and there was younger audiences and maybe never saw the original. But now like Moana just came out, maybe I want to say like 10 years ago or something, like the original. We just had a
It was
sequel to it
2016, I think.
last year, and now
Oh,
they're making another one live action. Like what? Um, I,
yeah.
my theory behind that is because I think The Rock is like a big producer in that, and I don't know how long he could play one of the characters in there and like stay like fit for that.
Yeah, it's the thing too is I like The Rock, but how many more terrible Rock movies do they got to put out there? Like I don't even think they're doing well. The Smashing Machine absolutely
Yeah,
bombed in
that'd be good.
office. There's like a million Jumanjis that I don't know who's watching those. It's just like I
Well,
feel like he's always coming out with new stuff and it's all
yeah. Oh,
garbage.
Jumanji actually did pretty good. Um,
Okay, so
but
he's
there's
not.
just so many that he does, and they're not going great. Like he did a superhero movie like a couple years ago that didn't hit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the Smashing Machine was good. It's just people didn't really care to go see him in it, I guess.
Yeah. I don't like it because this feels to me like another way Hollywood is kind of like what's what I'm looking for. They're out of ideas, so they're saying, we're going to hit, like kind of you mentioned earlier, we're going to hit John Q. Public on two arenas. We're going to give him this tool, like you remember when those deep fake tools would come out and you could put your face on like a thing from John
Right.
Wick or something, and that was really fun. But now I think they're doing that just to incentivize people to do the creative legwork for them, and then they're going to take that, like you said, well, you use this program, we have rights to everything, and you're going to be absolutely killing like people that are actually writers in the space, because why would I pay a writer for their script when I can just outsource creativity to the entire world? And it's kind of like, you ever heard that thing about like if you gave a bunch of monkeys typewriters, eventually one of them would type you Shakespeare. So it's like we're just going to outsource it to the masses, and eventually we're going to find a gem, and then we're going to monetize the hell out of it, and we're not going to have to
Yeah.
pay anybody else for it because we legally own it. So it's fun, I guess, but to me it seems really shady and shifty, and they better figure out some way to be compensating people
Yeah.
appropriately if they're coming up with the next great IP franchise,
Right.
whatever that
And
that may
and
be.
what happens when someone does like a fan and a fan's fan service of something and it's better than what Disney created? Like they're just gonna get criticized even
Right.
more.
Yeah, and that's another good point too. And because that's something actually just came to my mind now. Part of me wonders if by doing this is like big entertainment conglomerates, right? Are they going to be unintentionally kind of phasing themselves out? Because if you don't need them to come up with the ideas and produce them the same way, because me as an individual can come up with create something from AI, and again, they're going to be short form first because continuity issues and stuff. But as it gets better, will I as an individual be able to create my own cinematic universe simply using AI tools? And then do we even need these big media conglomerates anymore? Because people are going to be able to create their own IP products and peer-to-peer share them, and then they can catch wind on more of kind of like a viral indie platform float, than what
Yeah.
we've seen previously. Won't require marketing. Like that's what we've seen with virality. You don't need these giant marketing budgets that we're seeing for a lot of these films, like that Chrissy one that bombed. It's like, so it's an interesting thing. We're seeing the landscape of big media fundamentally change in front of our eyes, and I don't think that a lot of these big institutions really understand how this might in fact hurt them on the the opposite
Yeah.
end of things as these
They-
tools become more accessible to everybody.
Right. They're not just seeing it like everything in the short term, but like in the long ways, like how is it just gonna like affect just the industry in general?
It seems like everybody's just looking for some kind of way to include AI just because like that's what we should be doing right now. AI is here. How can we use AI? But I don't think they're necessarily understanding the long-term ramifications this could have to the entire media system and all of the parts that are involved in that. Like I personally would much rather give my money to somebody that personally created content using tools than a big studio. Because I'd rather give it right to the creator, not somebody who's essentially, it's kind of like they're mining for gold. Let's just throw everybody's crap in this little sifter and we'll get a couple pieces of gold eventually. So yeah, I mean, fun to play around with, but change is coming. I mean, you just look at individual creators, how legacy media, we talked about with Nolan earlier, is fundamentally changed. They're putting the power in the people here. And I got a feeling a couple years down the line, they're going to be wishing that maybe they didn't do that. But I don't know, man.
Yeah.
We'll see. It is fun, though. I do enjoy it, but it's weird times. And, and also, too, like we talk about things they don't foresee, this AI teddy bear thing, right? Great, stuffed animals. Let's throw AI into it and it'll make it better. But then there's the hallucinations they don't have under wraps. Like, it just seems AI is so buzzy right now. People will slap it into anything without thinking about the true ramifications that it's going to have going forward. And it's going to get messy, but we'll be here to talk about it. So I'm excited for that.
Right. We'll have more content. So.
Yeah, God bless it. All right, I think it's time for a quick break. I need a glass of water, but we'll be back with more blockchain report after this, so stay tuned. Wish you could grab cash without selling your Bitcoin? Yeah, me too. But hey, that's why Ledden exists. They're the global leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. We're talking over $9 billion issued since 2018 with a perfect record protecting client assets. Now you're probably asking, Hank, what makes a Ledden loan different? Well, I'd tell you, with custody loans, your collateral, it stays put. They don't go full degen and lend it out for yield. And there are no credit checks. It funds in under 6 hours, no monthly payments. You can repay anytime with 0 penalties. And for transparency, grown-ups actually want proof of reserves reports every 6 months verified by a top accounting firm. Bottom line here, gang, is Ledden lets Bitcoin holders unlock liquidity without selling. And you can check them out over at ledden.io/RoxomTV. That's ledn.io/RoxomTV. All right, we're back with some more Scroll Patrol. It has been a busy news day, so let's see what else is going on in the Twitterverse. It'll always be Twitter to me. I don't care what you decide to name it, Elon. Oh, look, here we go. It's me at RoxomTV, Hank Hudson. You can follow me there. All right, it says, take a peek at this convo I had. If you were joining us yesterday, we did an excellent conversation with Sam Callahan, the new Bitcoin strategy officer over at Orange BTC. And then, of course, we have one of our great friends of the program, Anton Iribozov, over at Zoppo Bank, having a really interesting talk about how Bitcoin might be reaching what Anton referred to as its IPO moment. Definitely worth taking a watch if you weren't able to join us today. Of course, you can click on the link there or check it out. We put all of our best segments and episodes on the RoxomTV and the Blockchain Report YouTube channel. So you can always go back and take a look at them, even if you weren't able to tune in live. So that's a great thing you're able to do. Let's see what else we got going on here currently. Elon did a thing. He says, aha, no way, copycat. As Jeff Bezos, there's news that he created a new AI startup where he will be the co-CEO. It's called Project Prometheus and has received $6.2 billion in funding, some from Bezos himself. The startup is going to build AI products. I mean, this is an absolute not surprise or whatever. We're in this AI arms race, and every billionaire with a checkbook and an agenda is looking to not get left behind in this, because while we're in this bubble right now, and seeming bubble, Nolan and I spoke about it earlier on the show, it is very akin to the space race, right? You just don't want to be the loser of it. It's both because we don't necessarily know what's going to come out of this, right? If you win AI, what does that really mean? And AI is particularly interesting, right? Because winning AI might mean making AI so good to where it ends up enslaving us all. So it's really it's a very precarious situation for everybody, but just nobody wants to be the loser in this one. So I think Sam Altman has even said it before too, you can't lose this. You got to invest a ton of money in it, because the loser of this one is going to be way behind. So not surprising, we saw another billionaire come out saying, I'm opening up an AI company too. And Bezos knows how to get things done. So something certainly worth watching. We got any more Scroll Patrol here, guys? Let's see. We have AG Pam Bondi says there's additional information on Epstein directly contradicting the DOJ's claims that no further investigation was needed. The goalposts are moving. Someone's protecting someone. Not a surprise here, gang. Remember, the whole Trump 180 on this situation, such a flip-flop. Why would you ever go from vehemently protesting these getting released to just being like, okay with it? I got a feeling someone's taking a black Sharpie and redacting the heck out of whatever will actually get released. There's probably going to be a bunch of pages missing from all this. The short and skinny is Trump knows they got to put something out. And at least if he says, yeah, do it, it seems like it's partly his idea, even though I think it was like 100 Republicans in Congress actually were against him and said, we want this release. So this is him doing an about face to save face, if I've ever seen it. And there's enough pictures of him and Epstein out there. I can't say anything for certain, obviously, but if the writing is on the wall, maybe that's something we should all be paying attention to. I don't know. It's scandalous though, but I'm here for it. This is the best kind of political theater. It's very juicy gossip, but obviously we need to get to the truth of this so that any kind of people that were affected by this, they can be made whole again, hopefully. But we'll see how it plays out. We got any more? We good for Scroll Patrol? Time for bullish and bearish? All right, guys. Well, I'm hearing it from the boss. It's time to wrap up today's show with a little bullish, bearish, or BS. So let's roll the stinger and get on into it. All right, gang, it has been a Wednesday, and now it's time to decide if things are looking good, bad, or otherwise for our beloved BTC. So let's break down today's top stories and see what they are going to mean going forward. So first to recap, we got President Donald Trump rolled out a black tie spectacle for Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, complete with fighter jets, a military band, and pistachio-crusted lamb, because geopolitics is apparently a cooking channel special now. Over the course of the day, Saudi investment commitments jumped from $600 billion to $1 trillion, allegedly, capped off with Trump designating Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally. The two countries also announced deals on civil nuclear energy, F-35 fighter jets, and a long list of high-stakes strategic partnerships. Ooh, my verdict on this one. I got to run bullish with this, right? I feel like this is good for Bitcoin because U.S.-Saudi cooperation at this scale strengthens geopolitical stability. And historically, Bitcoin thrives when global alliances look solid, but underlying trust in fiat and political actors gets questioned. So Saudi Arabia expanding wealth commitments signals that mega nations have no hesitation deploying trillion-dollar checks, which reinforces the macro trend toward alternative stores of value. All of this positions Bitcoin as the long-term hedge for countries that want optionality outside of the existing U.S.-Saudi financial axis. So in short, this is bullish because trillion-dollar diplomacy always pushes people toward hard assets, and we all know the hardest asset is BTC, baby. So I'm bullish on that first one. Next up, we got Bitcoin is dipped under 90K, sending smaller holders into complete panic mode, while whales responded by buying more Bitcoin like they were refilling a Costco-sized stash. Now, whale wallets holding over 1,000 BTC jumped sharply, even as retail holders fell to a yearly low. Analysts still expect a bottom this week, with multiple experts calling the drawdown a generational opportunity. Generational opportunity, gang, that sounds bullish to me. When whales accumulate aggressively during times of extreme fear. Remember, the fear and greed index has been as low as like 10 recently. So this historically marks cycle bottoms and foreshadows major upward reversals. Retail panic and whale confidence is the exact divergence that precedes explosive long-term rallies, especially when price dips under psychological levels like 90K. Smart money buying while sentiment collapses reinforces Bitcoin's resilience and sets the stage for a future supply shock. So big players aren't scared, they're still shopping, and that is some bullish news, baby. So I'm bullish on that one too. Too bullish to start. Let's see if we can make the rare clean sweep today. Last one. Now, the SEC's newly released 2026 examination priorities completely wipe out any mention of crypto. No digital assets, nothing really. And that's a drastic shift from the 2024 and 2025 when crypto had entire dedicated sections and was treated like the SEC's favorite stress toy. Instead, the agency is pivoting to AI, cyber risk, identity theft, and AML, while leaving crypto oversight in much lighter background lanes. So my verdict on this, I'm gonna call bullish, okay? I mean, a regulatory retreat reduces headline risk and remains one of Bitcoin's biggest sources of negative pressure for the last 3 years. With the SEC taking a step aside and the White House openly backing digital asset development, Bitcoin's long-term policy environment looks far more predictable. Less regulatory friction means more capital inflows, more institutional participation, and more breathing room for Bitcoin to continue its long-term monetization cycle. So the SEC ghosting crypto is literally the best vibe shift we've gotten in years now, all right? So let's recap today's total score. We got 3 bullish, 0 bearish, and 0 BS, which means today's diagnosis overall is extremely bullish, gang. Despite, the lot of FUD we've been seeing and the market price dropping, today is overwhelmingly bullish because global alliances are stabilizing, whales are loading up during fear, and the SEC is basically saying, you guys just handle the crypto thing now. That, my friends, is a rare triple stack of macro strength, behavioral signals, and regulatory momentum all pointing the same direction. Bitcoin wants higher prices once this volatility shakes out of all this mess. So remember, gang, the fundamentals we've seen right now that we saw just about a month ago when we were near all-time highs are almost the same. There's just a lot of macro chaos going right now that's shaking out weak hands across all markets. And we're seeing that in stocks. We're seeing that in cryptos right now, especially. So this is a time to just take a deep breath. Let's realize the state of the nation right now and know that Bitcoin's going to be fine and we're all going to be good. Just keep stacking slowly but surely, and you're going to come out the other end of this better than you ever thought. Whew. Well, gang, that is another episode here at the Blockchain Report. As always, I want to thank you so much for tuning in with us each and every weekday morning. It's always a pleasure bringing you the latest in crypto chaos and world news. And if you haven't already, do us the thing. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to RoxomTV, the Blockchain Report, and Hank at RoxomTV on every platform. And if you ever miss an episode, remember, just go to YouTube. Go to the Blockchain Report on YouTube, and you can check it out, everything we post there. We got every day's episode. We got the clips from all of our best interviews with some of the best and brightest people in the industry. It is truly one of the best places on all the interwebs to get your daily world news and stay abreast as to what is happening in your own backyard. So, gang, as always, thanks for tuning in. And until tomorrow, stay safe, stay informed, and please, always, hodl strong. I'll see you tomorrow.